Welcome to Value Plays Only, where Guy's Cradle can't even make blue, so who cares? Today, we have Tyler, playing Norman Osborne, aka Green Goblin. This is a discard-centric Grixis deck looking to use Green Goblin as a mini Underworld breach for your discard spells until you can string together a win. His hand contains Thassa's Oracle, Tainted Pact, Diabolic Intent, Underground Sea, and Wooded Foothills. His Lena mulligans are Demonic Council and Praetor's Grasp. Dan is playing Najeela, the Blade Blossom. This 5-color good stuff pile is packed full of wins. In addition to Najeela's specific combos like Derevi and Grim Hireling, it can win with Thassa's Oracle or Underworld Breach. His hand contains a Noble Hierarch, Delighted Halfling, Spellskite, Imperial Seal, Pact Negation, Grim Hireling, and Wooded Foothills. Cammy is playing Winota, Joiner of Forces. This deck is packed to the brim with creatures. It looks to stack out the board while cheating in massive combat threats. Her hand contains Esper Sentinel, Giver of Runes, Goblin Rabblemaster, Skyclave Apparition, Solitude, Soul Ring, and Wooded Foothills. John is playing Heliod, the Radiant Dawn. This deck looks to cast and flip Heliod as soon as possible. Once in this position, the deck looks to land a wheel effect to set up a massively discounted instant speed win. His hand contains Intuition, Day's Undoing, Talisman of Progress, Mox Diamond, Ancient Tomb, and Misty Rainforest. His Lena mulligan is an island. And with that, let's see some value plays. Tyler starts things off with a Wooded Foothills as land for turn. He passes the turn. Dan plays a Windswept Heath for turn. He pays life and cracks it, fetching up a Bayou. He casts a Delighted Halfling. Dan then passes the turn. Cammy plays a Wooded Foothills as land for turn. She pays a life and cracks it, fetching up a Plateau. Cammy casts Esper Sentinel. It resolves and Cammy passes the turn. John plays an Ancient Tomb as land for turn. He casts a Mox Diamond. Esper triggers and Cammy draws. Diamond resolves and John pitches a Misty Rainforest. He debates what he should hold up, but seeing the slow starts, John decides to cast Relic of Legends. It resolves and he passes the turn. In his end step, Tyler pays a life and cracks his Wooded Foothills, fetching up a Badlands. The turn then moves to Tyler. Tyler untaps and draws. He plays an Underground Sea as land for turn. He casts a Psychic Frog. The table recheck what format they're playing, and Frog resolves. Tyler then passes the turn. Dan untaps and draws. He plays a Wooded Foothills as land for turn. He pays a life and cracks it, fetching up a Volcanic Island. Dan taps out to cast his commander, Najeela, the Blade Blossom. It resolves and Dan passes the turn. Cammy untaps and draws. She plays a Plains as land for turn. She casts a Soul Ring. It resolves and Cammy taps out for a Goblin Rabblemaster. Cammy then moves to combat. Rabblemaster triggers to make a 1/1 Goblin with haste. Cammy swings her Hasty Goblin at John. He takes the damage and Cammy passes the turn. John untaps and draws. He plays a Mana Confluence as land for turn. He takes 3 damage to cast his commander, Heliod, the Radiant Dawn. It resolves and John debates tapping it to Relic to make mana, but looking at the growing Winota board, he opts to just pass the turn. Tyler untaps and draws. He goes straight to combat, swinging his Frog at Cammy. Cammy takes the damage and Frog triggers to draw. In his second main phase, Tyler casts Mox Diamond. Esper triggers and Cammy draws. Diamond resolves and Tyler pitches an Ancient Tomb. With the table questioning him pitching Tomb, Tyler casts Thassa's Oracle. The table goes quiet as priority slowly passes around. Thassa's Oracle resolves and triggers. Tyler holds priority and goes to cast his final spell, which is Tainted Pact. Tyler instantly realizes he doesn't have Demonic Consultation, nor does he have the mana for Tainted Pact. Tyler, blown out by his own doing, resolves Thassa's Oracle's trigger, looking at the top 3 cards of his library, bottoming all 3. With nothing left to his plan this game, Tyler passes the turn. Dan untaps Amazed to be Alive. He plays a Flooded Strand as land for turn. He pays a life and cracks it, fetching up a Tropical Island. He casts a Noble Hierarch. It resolves, and Dan casts Spellskite. He then goes to combat, swinging Najeela at Tyler. Najeela and Noble Hierarch trigger. Najeela gets +1/+1 and then makes a 1/1 warrior tapped and attacking Tyler. Tyler blocks the warrior with Thassa and takes 4. In his second main phase, Dan casts Imperial Seal. Esper triggers and Cammy draws. Dan then searches up a card to the top of his library and loses 2 life. Dan then passes the turn. Cammy untaps and draws. She plays an Arid Mesa as land for turn. She pays a life and cracks it, fetching up a Sacred Foundry. Into play untap, paying 2 life. She casts her commander, Winota, Joiner of Forces. Cammy goes to combat. Rabblemaster triggers to make a 1/1 Goblin. Cammy swings her trio of Goblin Boys at Dan. Winota triggers 3 times, and Rabblemaster triggers to get +2/+0. The first trigger puts in Magus of the Moon, tapped and attacking Dan. The second trigger puts in Professional Facebreaker, tapped and attacking Tyler. The final Winota trigger puts Combat Celebrant into play, tapped and attacking John. The table stare at the absolute end of the game next turn with 2 combats and a boatload of triggers as they all take the damage. Facebreaker triggers 3 times to make 3 treasures. In her second main phase, Cammy casts Grand Abolisher. It resolves and Cammy passes the turn. John untaps and draws. He casts a Lotus Petal. Esper triggers and Cammy draws. John pays 2 life to activate the Transform ability of Heliod, turning it to Heliod, the Warped Eclipse. John then passes the turn. Tyler asks if John could wheel them into new hands, to hopefully give Tyler and Dan some new cards to deal with Cammy. John says he can't do anything without an existing discount and passes the turn. Tyler untaps and draws. He goes to combat and swings Psychic Frog at Dan. Dan declares no blocks to help draw an out to Cammy's board. He takes the damage and Frog triggers to draw. In his second main phase, Tyler casts a Lion's Eye Diamond. Esper triggers and he pays. Tyler then moves to pass the turn. In his end step, John flashes in a Talisman of Progress. Esper triggers and Cammy draws. Dan asks John if he could get a card that draws them some cards but doesn't totally wheel. John says that'll be your choice and casts Intuition, targeting Dan. Cammy responds with a Silence, trying to cut John off of whatever it is he's getting. John responds with a Day's Undoing, over top of the Silence. Tyler steps in here and shows a Force of Will to John. He says he's now worried that if the wheel resolves, John will just win at instant speed. If he counters it, Cammy almost certainly wins. A good 10 minutes of discussion go here about what John can do to help the board without winning or setting up for a win before Tyler's next turn. John says he will make his whole plan to take the minimum number of actions to make sure he can overload a Cyclonic Rift and then pass. He also says he won't start up some crazy win line in Dan's or Cammy's turns either, just stopping wins as needed. He also says he'll play with his hand face up in this phase so they know what they're getting off the wheel. Tyler debates for a while but ultimately decides to see what happens, as they're dead to Cammy right now as it is, and a random 7 can't be that bad. Tyler opts instead to respond to Day's Undoing by casting Tainted Pact. He holds priority and cracks his Lion's Eye Diamond for 3 blue mana. Tainted Pact resolves and Tyler starts exiling, looking for something to do at instant speed. He exiles around half of his library, not happy with any of his options. Eventually he sees Snap. He adds it to hand. Tyler then casts Snap, targeting Magus of the Moon. Magus bounces and Tyler untaps both of his lands. Day's Undoing finally resolves, and everyone shuffles their graveyard and hand into their libraries and draws 7. In response to Silence, John takes one to cast Snap, targeting Combat Celebrant. It resolves and John untaps his land. John casts Coveted Jewel for free. Tyler's alarm bells go off yet again as Tyler and Dan asks what the follow-up is. John shows his whole hand at this point to show his plan is to try and draw into Cyclonic Rift. After a lot of discussion, Tyler decides this is representing too much value. He casts Red Elemental Blast, targeting Heliod. John responds with a Machine God's Effigy. It enters as a copy of Grand Abolisher. The table all do a collective gasp here, even though it's not John's turn, so this actually has no effect. The entire table missed this though, and treat the Abolisher as being active for this step. John then casts a bad proxy of even the score, with X is 24. He draws 24 cards. John casts Mental Misstep, targeting REB. Tyler says he has a response, but John points out he has a Grand Abolisher. Again, this shouldn't have any effect here, but may have required John to use another one of his 30 cards. Misstep counters REB. Coveted Jewel resolves, and John draws 3. John flashes in Soul Ring and Arcane Signet. He sees a line now that doesn't take any more drawing. He casts Draneth Magistrate. He then casts Swords to Plowshares, targeting Winota. Winota is exiled, and Cammy gains 4. John casts a Memory Jar, and then lets Silence resolve. Finally, the intuition everyone forgot about resolves. John searches up Silence, Abeyance, and Amphibian Downpour. Dan gives him Amphibian Downpour. The turn finally moves to Dan. Dan untaps and draws. Everyone looks to see if John wants to flash anything. He says he's still planning to do nothing except stop a win from Dan. Dan plays Plateau as land for turn. He casts Lion's Eye Diamond. Esper triggers and Cammy draws. Dan casts Summoner's Pact. John tells him not to go for it, as the other two egg him on. Summoner's Pact resolves, and Dan searches up Derevi, Imperial Tactician, to hand. He taps Delighted Halfling to cast an uncounterable Derevi. John responds with a Blind Obedience. Esper triggers and Cammy draws. Dan responds with a Tainted Pact. John responds to that with a Spellskite. It resolves, and John then casts a Boromir, Warden of the Tower. It resolves, and John follows it up with a Paradoxical Outcome, targeting his 9 mana rocks. Tyler casts Flusterstorm, with all copies targeting Paradoxical Outcome. Esper triggers and Cammy draws. John Flusterstorms back with 1 copy on each of Tyler's Flusterstorm copies. Outcome resolves, and John returns all his rocks and draws 9. John replays most of his rocks for free. John casts Spellseeker. It resolves, and John searches up Cyclonic Rift. John flashes in the rest of his rocks and then overloads Cyclonic Rift, discounted by 4. Cyclonic Rift resolves, bouncing all the non-land, non-John permanents. John then casts Commandeer, targeting Tainted Pact, pitching Sink into Stupor and Hydroelectric Specimen. John exiles and then adds the top card of his library to hand, not looking to go any further. Blind Obedience then resolves. Derevi finally resolves and triggers to untap Bayou. At this point, the table see the writing on the wall. John says he doesn't plan to win this turn cycle, but the table insists he get it the hell over with. John then casts the One Ring, Coveted Jewel, drawing 3 cards, Mana Vault, Smothering Tithe, and then Machine God's Effigy as a copy of Spellseeker. It enters and triggers to search up a Words of Wisdom. John casts Words of Wisdom. Dan responds with a Vampiric Tutor. John casts Pact of Negation to counter it. Words resolves, and everyone draws. John casts Phyrexian Metamorph as a copy of Coveted Jewel to draw 3 cards. He finally gets what he needs to end the suffering. John casts Seagate Restoration, drawing 25 cards. He casts Hullbreaker Horror. John casts Chromatic Orrery. Hullbreaker Horror triggers to bounce Arcane Signet. John starts a loop of casting 2 rocks back and forth, bouncing each other with Hullbreaker Horror. With Chromatic Orrery, John can extort the spells on every iteration of the loop through Blind Obedience, draining his opponents for 1 each time. He does this over and over until the table is dead. And with that, John wins the game. So, what do we learn today? In the choice between lethal punches or a random wheel, sometimes maybe you should just take the punches. If you have any tips for the video, leave them below. Subscribe if you feel like it. Until next time, keep making value plays.
Only because it's funny. Fast as Oracle.
I don't think it's funny, Dan.
I don't have anything I can do.
ETB, a whole priority. That's the wrong card.
What was it?
I thought it was console.
Oh my god, he has painted pug. Oh my god.
I'll scry 3.
Dude, that's fucking awesome.
It's not awesome.
He doesn't like
No,
exile.
honestly, can you get us to draw cards? Because we could maybe.
She has an Esper.
But I'm saying, if you've got a wheel, and I get to look at 7 cards to try to help us out this board,
Yeah,
then that might be helpful.
I hear that.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Can you get like a modest wheel? Something that's like.
What does that even?
That's like draw 3.
I will look.
It's really sad because I could probably stop you. Cammy just guarantee wins now.
You literally asked me to wheel.
Making a deal with John is like talking to a genie.
It's wild.
It's like, he will
We
do
literally
it.
has no deal. I'm just saying.
I'm asking you to just not push.
I'm gonna be a friendly guy.
All right.
There's no way.
Yeah.
There's
All right,
no way.
we can resolve this.
You're gonna be the definition of friendly guy for John. Don't worry, John. I'm still tracking the definition. Yeah, I did shuffle to Revy. That's it.
Dan, you see what I'm saying? It's like if we deal with it, Dan just untaps and wins with the Revy.
That was crazy.
Yeah, like, are you planning to deal with Cammy's board? Did
Yeah.
you get there?
Here's what I have. I'm doing exactly what I said. I'm gonna get Psych Rift, I'm gonna overload it, and then I'm gonna let it pass to Dan.
That's what I'm saying. So we should have just let Cammy get the dub and move on. That's what I'm saying.
I
It's
agree.
crazy, dude.
Kimmy!
Do I have to like do a turn, or can you just show us what you're gonna do? To win?
Yeah, that's
That's
true.
what
Can
I'm
we just
saying.
do this?
I literally am doing exactly what I said.
John, the lesson is learned.
I will
Okay.
pass.
I like
Right.
got a seizure just looking at your board. So